Riley Thornton gazed out the window of her corner office, the Seattle skyline a familiar backdrop to her thoughts. At 68, she had climbed to the pinnacle of the publishing world, serving as CEO of one of the largest literary agencies in the Pacific Northwest. Her silver hair was elegantly styled, her tailored suit a testament to both her success and her impeccable taste. Yet as she watched the bustling city below, a familiar emptiness gnawed at her heart. The intercom buzzed, startling her from her reverie. "Miss Thornton, your 2 o'clock is here." Her assistant's voice crackled through the speaker. "Send them in, Sarah," Riley replied, smoothing her jacket and turning to face the door. She hadn't bothered to check her schedule. At this point in her career, most meetings blended into a monotonous parade of pitches and negotiations. The door opened, and Riley felt her breath catch in her throat. The young man who entered was strikingly handsome, with tousled dark hair and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and warmth. He couldn't have been more than 30, and Riley immediately chastised herself for noticing such things. "Miss Thornton," he said, extending his hand with a confident smile. "I'm Henry Matthews. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Riley shook his hand, hoping he didn't notice the slight tremor in her fingers. "Of course, Mr. Matthews. Please have a seat and tell me what brings you to Thornton Literary today." As Henry began to outline his proposal for a new environmental law journal, Riley found herself captivated, not just by his ideas, but by his passion and eloquence. It had been years since she'd felt this engaged in a meeting, this alive with the possibilities of a new project. "Your proposal is intriguing, Mr. Matthews," Riley said when he finished, surprised to find that nearly an hour had passed. "I think there's definitely potential here. Why don't we schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss the details further?" Henry's face lit up with a boyish grin that made Riley's heart flutter traitorously. "That would be wonderful, Miss Thornton, and please call me Henry." "Henry," she repeated, the name feeling oddly intimate on her tongue. "Then you must call me Riley." As he left her office, Riley sank back into her chair, her mind whirling. What was wrong with her? She was acting like a lovesick teenager, not the powerful businesswoman she'd spent decades becoming. She pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the stack of manuscripts on her desk. She had no time for foolish fantasies. But over the next few weeks, Riley found her thoughts drifting to Henry more and more often. Their follow-up meetings were productive and engaging, filled with spirited debates and shared laughter. She found herself looking forward to their interactions in a way she hadn't anticipated. It was during one of these meetings, as they pored over potential cover designs for the journal, that everything changed. Henry leaned in close to point out a detail, and suddenly Riley was acutely aware of his proximity, the scent of his cologne, the warmth radiating from his body. "Riley?" Henry's voice cut through her thoughts. "Are you all right? You seem distracted." She blinked, realizing she'd been staring. "I'm fine," she said quickly, but Henry's brow furrowed in concern. "Are you sure? You've been working so hard on this project. Maybe we should take a break, get some fresh air." Before she could talk herself out of it, Riley found herself agreeing. They ended up walking through a nearby park, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grass. As they strolled, their conversation drifted from work to more personal topics. "So, Henry," Riley said, curiosity getting the better of her, "a handsome, successful young man like yourself, I'm surprised you're not married." Henry chuckled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I was engaged, actually. It ended about a year ago." "I'm sorry to hear that," Riley said softly. He shrugged. "It was for the best. We wanted different things out of life. She couldn't understand my passion for environmental law, why I'd choose a lower-paying career over a cushy corporate job." He glanced at Riley. "What about you? Has there been anyone special in your life?" Riley felt a pang in her chest. "There was once. My ex-husband, James. We divorced nearly 20 years ago. Since then, well, let's just say my work has been my main focus." They walked in companionable silence for a moment before Henry spoke again. "Can I ask you something, Riley? Something personal?" She nodded, both nervous and intrigued. Do you ever regret it? Choosing your career over other things? The question hit her like a physical blow. Riley stopped walking, turning to face Henry. His expression was open, genuinely curious, without a hint of judgment. Sometimes, she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. Don't get me wrong, I'm proud of what I've accomplished. But there are moments when I wonder what my life might have been like if I'd made different choices. Henry stepped closer, his eyes intense. It's not too late, you know, to have those things you've wondered about. Riley's heart pounded in her chest. Henry, Before she could finish her thought, he leaned in and kissed her. For a moment, Riley was too shocked to respond. Then, as if a dam had broken, she found herself kissing him back with a passion she'd thought long forgotten. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Riley felt a whirlwind of emotions, exhilaration, desire, and an overwhelming sense of guilt. We can't do this, she said, stepping back. Henry, I'm old enough to be your mother. It's inappropriate. Henry reached for her hand. Riley, age is just a number. What I feel for you, it's real. You're brilliant, passionate, beautiful. Can't we at least explore this? Riley pulled her hand away, her mind reeling. I need time to think, she said. This is all happening so fast. Take all the time you need, Henry replied. I'll be here when you're ready. The next few weeks were torture for Riley. She threw herself into work, trying to distract herself from thoughts of Henry. But everywhere she turned, there were reminders of him. In the journal layouts on her desk, in the coffee shop where they'd had impromptu meetings, in the park where they'd shared that fateful kiss. She knew the logical thing to do was to end whatever this was, before it truly began. The age difference alone was scandal enough to potentially ruin her career and reputation. Not to mention the power imbalance, she was essentially Henry's boss on this project. It was unethical, irresponsible, and completely out of character for her. And yet, Riley couldn't deny the way she felt when she was with Henry. He challenged her intellectually, made her laugh, and awakened feelings she thought were long dead. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive. After weeks of internal debate, Riley made her decision. She called Henry and asked him to meet her at a quiet restaurant across town, away from prying eyes. As they sat across from each other, an undercurrent of tension thrumming between them, Riley took a deep breath. Henry, I've thought long and hard about this. About us. Henry leaned forward, his eyes hopeful. And I think we should give this a chance, Riley said, her heart racing. It won't be easy. There will be obstacles, judgment, but if you're willing to face that, then so am I. The smile that lit up Henry's face was brighter than the sun. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Riley, you've made me the happiest man alive. I promise you won't regret this. As they left the restaurant hand in hand, Riley felt a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. She was stepping into uncharted territory, risking everything she'd built for a chance at love. But looking at Henry, she knew it was worth it. The first few months of their relationship were like a dream. They kept things discreet at work, maintaining a professional facade while stealing moments of intimacy whenever they could. Weekends were spent exploring Seattle's hidden gems, having deep conversations over wine, and rediscovering the joys of physical intimacy. Riley felt as though she'd been given a new lease on life. Henry's youthful energy was infectious, inspiring her to try new things and see the world through fresh eyes. For his part, Henry seemed to revel in Riley's wisdom and experience, soaking up her stories and insights like a sponge. But as their relationship deepened, the realities of their situation began to set in. Whispers started circulating at the office, questioning Henry's rapid rise within the company. Riley found herself constantly on edge, worried that their secret would be discovered. The breaking point came at a company gala. Riley and Henry had agreed to attend separately, but as the night wore on, they found it increasingly difficult to stay apart. In a moment of weakness, Henry pulled Riley onto a secluded balcony, kissing her passionately. Neither of them noticed Riley's daughter, Sophie, witnessing the entire exchange. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Sophie, disgusted and hurt, confronted Riley in front of the entire party. The scandal spread like wildfire through Seattle's literary circles. Overnight, Riley went from respected industry leader to a punchline, the subject of salacious gossip and judgment. In the aftermath, Riley was forced to step down from her position as CEO. The company she'd built from the ground up, her life's work, was slipping through her fingers. Henry, too, faced backlash, with many accusing him of sleeping his way to the top. As they sat in Riley's penthouse apartment, both shell-shocked by how quickly everything had unraveled, Henry turned to her with tears in his eyes. "Riley, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't pursued you, if I just kept my feelings to myself." Riley placed a finger on his lips, silencing him. "No, Henry. We're both responsible for our choices. And despite everything, I don't regret choosing you." Henry pulled her close, holding her tightly. "What do we do now?" he whispered into her hair. Riley took a deep breath, her mind racing. She thought about everything she'd lost, her career, her reputation, potentially even her relationship with her daughter. But looking at Henry, she also saw everything she'd gained: passion, joy, a renewed sense of purpose. "We start over," she said firmly. "Together." And so, at 69 years old, Riley Thornton embarked on a new chapter of her life. She and Henry moved to a small coastal town in Oregon, far from the judging eyes of Seattle's elite. They opened a small independent bookstore, combining Riley's publishing expertise with Henry's environmental focus to create a unique literary haven. It wasn't easy. There were days when Riley missed her old life acutely, when the whispers and stares of their new neighbours felt unbearable. There were moments when the age gap between them seemed insurmountable, when Riley worried she was holding Henry back from the life he deserved. But there was also joy, in quiet mornings spent reading the newspaper together, in spirited debates over dinner, in lazy afternoons walking hand in hand on the beach. Riley rediscovered her love of writing, penning a memoir that became an unexpected bestseller. Henry threw himself into local environmental causes, making a real difference in their small community. Slowly, tentatively, Riley began to rebuild her relationship with Sophie. It took time, patience, and many difficult conversations, but eventually they found their way back to each other. When Sophie gave birth to Riley's first grandchild, it was Henry who encouraged Riley to make the trip to Seattle, to take that first step towards reconciliation. 5 years after the scandal that had turned her life upside down, Riley stood on the porch of their cozy beachfront home, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Henry's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" he murmured, pressing a soft kiss to her neck. Riley turned in his embrace, meeting his gaze. The boyish charm that had first captured her heart was still there, but it was now tempered with a depth of experience and understanding. They had weathered storms together, faced judgment and hardship, and come out stronger for it. "Not a single one," she replied, drawing him in for a kiss. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Riley reflected on the unexpected journey her life had taken. She had lost much, it was true. Her career, her status, the carefully constructed image she'd maintained for decades. But in losing those things, she had gained something far more precious. True love, a sense of freedom and the courage to live life on her own terms. At 74, Riley Thornton was happier than she'd ever been. And as she and Henry walked hand in hand back into their home, she knew that the greatest adventures of her life were still to come.